relationship and you don't live for Him and follow Scripture, then you're a liar and the truth isn't in you. Verse 5 goes on to say, but whoever keeps His word, in him the love of God has truly been perfected. By this we know that we are in Him. So now, don't misunderstand verse 5 and if verse 5 is not saying that you are perfect, because I'll tell you that you are far from it. If you're watching this video, I can assure you that you are not perfect. And if your spouse is watching with you, you're probably looking at each other right now going like, he's telling the truth because you ain't perfect. I've had to live with you for 2.5 weeks or 3 weeks, and we haven't left the house, and we know we're not perfect, right? That's not perfection in the fact that we're perfect here. What he's saying this is that the love of God has truly been perfected in us. What does God desire? God desires for you and I to have a personal relationship with Him. In other words, He wants to bridge that gap. We're over here, we're full of sin, God's over here, and the only thing that can bridge that gap is the cross. Jesus is the only thing that can bridge that gap. And so when we accept Christ and that gap is bridged, then that's what he's saying here. The love of God has truly been perfected. In other words, I see in your life, in my life, I follow the commandments. I'm understanding what God's saying. Am I perfect? Not by any means. Am I going to make mistakes? Absolutely. Here's the thing. We're not going to be perfect, but God's love in us is going to be perfective, and it's going to reflect in the way we act and the way that we treat one another. Verse 6 goes on to say this, the one who says he abides in Him ought himself to walk in the same manner as He walked. And if you notice, He walked, the He is capitalized. So as you look at that and you see that fact is like, you know, what would Jesus do? We ask ourselves that a lot. Say, where would Jesus place Himself in our situation? What would He do if he were in my shoes? That's what we ask ourselves. That's what verse 6 kind of points to and says we should walk the way He walks. So if we're not walking the way that Jesus would walk or did walk, then we're not doing right. Verse 6 points primarily to this, that people are watching us, and some of us are the only Jesus people will ever see. And as we think about that, as we look at that and we ask ourselves, am I a good example of what people are seeing in the world? Hey, we're going through a crisis, right? I mean, we're going through all this. I mean, what are we supposed to do in this? How are we supposed to act? Well, I'll tell you how we're supposed to act. We're supposed to act the way Jesus would act, and that acted. And that's what we need to ask ourselves. Are we acting okay? Are we not doing okay? I'll tell you, it's crazy. I mean, I've gone to the store a few times and people are kind of acting crazy. I mean, they're I don't know what people are doing with all the toilet paper they're buying. I mean, who knows? I don't know why somebody needs to buy Lysol and hand sanitizer and toilet paper every time they go to the store. I'll tell you, I don't know. But in doing so, what are we showing people? If that's us, what are we showing people? Well, I'll tell you what, we're showing people that we're scared and we're insecure and we don't know what's going to happen. Sorry if you bought all the toilet paper up and I offended you. I apologize. You know, I don't mean to offend anybody, but in this time, in this world, what we need to be doing is doing what Jesus would do. Now, I'm not here to convict you or tell you anything, but I'm going to tell you, if you've got stuff stored up and other people need it, what a great opportunity this would be to share what you have with other people. I know times are uncertain. I know they're talking about extending this thing out another month. I know that's a big deal. I mean, that's a long time. I can't tell you. I don't know the answer to that. I do know that every time I pray that God would remove this crisis from our land and from the entire world and just take it away. I mean, I looked at the numbers earlier tonight, and they're astronomical. I mean, what's going on? I know it seems that some countries have just stopped reporting. I know the United States has jumped way out in front with the number of people who have tested positive for the coronavirus. At the same time, you and I have to remember God's in control. I shared with one of our commissioners, and I might have already shared this on a video, but I shared with one of our commissioners. I said, I have written in my Bible, in the back, the man of God doing the will of God is immortal until God's purpose is accomplished in that individual. That applies to each and every one of us. That does not just apply to the men. It applies to every man, woman, and child. When we're doing the will of God, when God has given us a task, we're immortal. I mean, He's not going to take us until He is finished with it, what that task is accomplished in us. So, at the same time, we have to understand God's in control. God's got this. Am I telling you that you're going to survive this? I have no idea. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is God's in control, and if we get sick, and if God calls us home, that's His purpose in our life. I shared on Sunday, I believe, that what we have going on is this. Each one of us has been appointed a time. And I don't believe that we can cheat that time. I believe God's going to call us when God calls us. I still believe that we need to abide by what our state has said and stay home as much as possible, and let's flatten this curve out so not so many people get sick. But God's in control, and I believe that God's got this. I know that He's got this, and that His purpose will be fulfilled in each and every one of us. Let's go on and read verse 7. It says this, Beloved, I am not writing a new commandment to you, but an old commandment which you have had from the beginning. The old commandment is the word which you have heard. On the other hand, I am writing a new commandment to you, which is true in Him and in you, because the darkness is passing away and the true light is already shining. This is what he's writing to them, and he's telling them here. He's saying, hey, listen, I'm not telling you anything that you hadn't heard before. I mean, if you're a Christian and you've been a Christian for a while, I can assure you, you have heard you need to walk the talk and talk the walk. I mean, you need to. I mean, I can't just say, well, I'm a Christian, and then live like I want to the rest of the week. If I just show up on Sunday and say, well, I'm just going to tell you a good word, but the rest of the week I live like the devil, then I'm not walking what I'm talking, am I? And so that's what he's saying here. He's like, hey, well, you've known from the beginning that you needed to walk the walk and talk the talk. But this is the old commandment. Now, this is not the difference between Old Testament, New Testament. This is something that he's saying, this is nothing new. This is from the beginning of Christianity, okay? This is when you first accepted Christ, you understood what it was all about. And then I think sometimes we stray from that. He's reminding of that here. And then in verse 8, he said, On the other hand, I am writing a new commandment to you, which is true in Him and in you, because the darkness is passing away and the true light is already shining. So what is this new commandment that he's writing here? Well, if you look back up, what he's saying to us here is this, is that we should love sacrificially. We should love sacrificially in everything that we do. We should not be being stingy or keep it to ourselves. I mean, when I say stingy, I'm talking about with our salvation. I mean, with our experience, we should not be stingy with that. It's like, well, I got it, but I don't want you to have it. No. Let me refer back to what one of the commissioners wrote me in an email. And he said, I cannot wait to the day where I can hug my friends. I can't even wait to the day when I can even hug my enemies. That's what he's talking about here. Let's love sacrificially. Just because I don't agree with you, just because I'm not on the same page with you, doesn't mean that I shouldn't love you, because that's what Christ commands us. He commands us to love one another. Now, he's not just talking about Christians. We should watch. See, somebody started watching, and so I said watch. We should love each other like our lives depended on it. Whether we like one another, whether we don't like one another, doesn't matter. We should love each other sacrificially. When you look at verse 8 there, it talks about the darkness. When we get saved, there's a certain darkness about us. When we get saved, there's something that's in us that's dark. As we're saved, what happens to that? It's passing away. Just like over in, I think it's 1 Corinthians, says the old man has passed away. That's our old self, and then we have a new self. Well, when we look at that here, that's what he's talking about. That darkness is fading, and the true light is shining in our lives. I mean, sometimes we struggle with what to do. Sometimes we don't understand in situations like, what should I do? I've been there. I know. We're not always confident in what's going on in our lives. We sometimes we struggle. I mean, all of us struggle. Well, here he's saying there ought to be a lot less darkness and a lot more light, and that's our Christian walk. I mean, I'll be honest with you. There's been times in my life where I was like, man, the old me would have done blank right here. I mean, I'm just telling you, the old me would have done. But Christ in me says,